Okay, guys, hi. Happy Taco Tuesday, January 27th again, part 5. Player, piano, let's get going. This is a long one.
Player piano. Economic disruption. The previous 3 sections were essentially about security risks posed by powerful AI, risks from the AI itself, risks from misuse by individuals and small organizations, and risks of misuse by states and large organizations. If we put aside security risks or assume they have been solved, the next question is economic. What will be the effect of this infusion of incredible human capital on the economy? Clearly, the most obvious effect will be to greatly increase economic growth. The pace of advances in scientific research, biomedical innovation, manufacturing, supply chains, the efficiency of the financial system, and much more are almost guaranteed to lead to a much faster rate of economic growth. In Machines of Loving Grace, I suggest that a 10 to 20% sustained annual GDP growth rate may be possible. But it should be clear that this is a double-edged sword. What are the economic prospects for most existing humans in such a world? New technologies often bring labor market shocks, and in the past humans have always recovered from them, but I am concerned that this is because these previous shocks affected only a small fraction of the full possible range of human abilities, leaving room for humans to expand to new tasks. AI will have effects that are much broader and occur much faster, and therefore I worry it will be much more challenging to make things work out well. Labor market disruption. There are 2 specific problems I am worried about: labor market displacement and concentration of economic power. Let's start with the first one. This is a topic that I warned about very publicly in 2025, where I predicted that AI could displace half of all entry-level white-collar jobs in the next 1 to 5 years, even as it accelerates economic growth and scientific progress. This warning started a public debate about the topic. Many CEOs, technologists, and economists agreed with me, but others assumed I was falling prey to a lump of labor fallacy and didn't know how labor markets worked. And some didn't see the 1 to 5 year time range and thought I was claiming AI is displacing jobs right now, which I agree it is likely not. So it is worth going through in detail why I am worried about labor displacement to clear up these misunderstandings. As a baseline, it's useful to understand how labor markets normally respond to advances in technology. When a new technology comes along, it starts by making pieces of a given human job more efficient. For example, early in the Industrial Revolution, machines, such as upgraded plows, enabled human farmers to be more efficient at some aspects of the job. This improved the productivity of farmers, which increased their wages. In the next step, some parts of the job of farming could be done entirely by machines, for example with the invention of the threshing machine or seed drill. In this phase, humans did a lower and lower fraction of the job, but the work they did complete became more and more leveraged because it is complementary to the work of machines, and their productivity continued to rise. As described by Jevons' paradox, the wages of farmers and perhaps even the number of farmers continued to increase. Even when 90% of the job is being done by machines, humans can simply do 10x more of the 10% they still do, producing 10x as much output for the same amount of labor. Eventually, machines do everything or almost everything, as with modern combine harvesters, tractors, and other equipment. At this point, farming as a form of human employment really does go into steep decline, and this potentially causes serious disruption in the short term. But because farming is just one of many useful activities that humans are able to do, people eventually switch to other jobs, such as operating factory machines. This is true even though farming accounted for a huge proportion of employment ex ante. 250 years ago, 90% of Americans lived on farms. In Europe, 50 to 60% of employment was agricultural. Now those percentages are in the low single digits in those places because workers switched to industrial jobs and later, knowledge work jobs. The economy can do what previously required most of the labor force with only 1 to 2% of it, freeing up the rest of the labor force to build an ever more advanced industrial society. There's no fixed lump of labor, just an ever-expanding ability to do more and more with less and less. People's wages rise in line with the GDP exponential, and the economy maintains full employment once disruptions in the short term have passed. It's possible things will go roughly the same way with AI, but I would bet pretty strongly against it. Here are some reasons I think AI is likely to be different. Speed. The pace of progress in AI is much faster than for previous technological revolutions. For example, in the last 2 years, AI models went from barely being able to complete a single line of code to writing all or almost all of the code for some people, including engineers at Anthropic. 37. Soon, they may do the entire task of a software engineer end to end. 38. It is hard for people to adapt to this pace of change, both to the changes in how a given job works and in the need to switch to new jobs. Even legendary programmers are increasingly describing themselves as behind. The pace may, if anything, continue to speed up, as AI coding models increasingly accelerate the task of AI development. To be clear, speed in itself does not mean labor markets and employment won't eventually recover. It just implies the short-term transition will be unusually painful compared to past technologies, since humans and labor markets are slow to react and to equilibrate. Cognitive breadth. As suggested by the phrase country of geniuses in a data center, AI will be capable of a very wide range of human cognitive abilities, perhaps all of them. This is very different from previous technologies like mechanized farming, transportation, or even computers. 39. This will make it harder for people to switch easily from jobs that are displaced to similar jobs that they would be a good fit for. For example, the general intellectual abilities required for entry-level jobs in, say, finance, consulting, and law are fairly similar, even if the specific knowledge is quite different. A technology that disrupted only one of these three would allow employees to switch to the two other close substitutes, or for undergraduates to switch majors. But disrupting all three at once, along with many other similar jobs, may be harder for people to adapt to. Furthermore, it's not just that most existing jobs will be disrupted. That part has happened before. Recall that farming was a huge percentage of employment. But farmers could switch to the relatively similar work of operating factory machines, even though that work hadn't been common before. By contrast, AI is increasingly matching the general cognitive profile of humans, which means it will also be good at the new jobs that would ordinarily be created in response to the old ones being automated. Another way to say it is that AI isn't a substitute for specific human jobs, but rather a general labor substitute for humans. Slicing by cognitive ability. Across a wide range of tasks, AI appears to be advancing from the bottom of the ability ladder to the top. For example, in coding, our models have proceeded from the level of a mediocre coder to a strong coder to a very strong coder. 40. We are now starting to see the same progression in white-collar work in general. We are thus at risk of a situation where, instead of affecting people with specific skills or in specific professions who can adapt by retraining, AI is affecting people with certain intrinsic cognitive properties, namely lower intellectual ability, which is harder to change. It is not clear where these people will go or what they will do, and I am concerned that they could form an unemployed or very low-wage underclass. To be clear, things somewhat like this have happened before. For example, computers and the internet are believed by some economists to represent skill-biased technological change. But this skill biasing was both not as extreme as what I expect to see with AI, and is believed to have contributed to an increase in wage inequality, 41. So it is not exactly a reassuring precedent. Ability to fill in the gaps. The way human jobs often adjust in the face of new technology is that there are many aspects to the job, and the new technology, even if it appears to directly replace humans, often has gaps in it. If someone invents a machine to make widgets, humans may still have to load raw material into the machine. Even if that takes only 1% as much effort as making the widgets manually, human workers can simply make 100x more widgets. But AI, in addition to being a rapidly advancing technology, is also a rapidly adapting technology. During every model release, AI companies carefully measure what the model is good at and what it isn't, and customers also provide such information after the launch. Weaknesses can be addressed by collecting tasks that embody the current gap and training on them for the next model. Early in generative AI, users noticed that AI systems had certain weaknesses, such as AI image models generating hands with the wrong number of fingers, and many assumed these weaknesses were inherent to the technology. If they were, it would limit job disruption. But pretty much every such weakness gets addressed quickly, often, within just a few months. It's worth addressing common points of skepticism. First, there is the argument that economic diffusion will be slow, such that even if the underlying technology is capable of doing most human labor, the actual application of it across the economy may be much slower. For example, in industries that are far from the AI industry and slow to adopt. Slow diffusion of technology is definitely real. I talk to people from a wide variety of enterprises, and there are places where the adoption of AI will take years. That's why my prediction for 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs being disrupted is 1 to 5 years, even though I suspect we'll have powerful AI, which would be, technologically speaking, enough to do most or all jobs, not just entry-level, in much less than 5 years. But diffusion effects merely buy us time, and I am not confident they will be as slow as people predict. Enterprise AI adoption is growing at rates much faster than any previous technology, largely on the pure strength of the technology itself. Also, even if traditional enterprises are slow to adopt new technology, startups will spring up to serve as glue and make the adoption easier. If that doesn't work, the startups may simply disrupt the incumbents directly. That could lead to a world where it isn't so much that specific jobs are disrupted as it is that large enterprises are disrupted in general and replaced with much less labor-intensive startups. This could also lead to a world of geographic inequality, where an increasing fraction of the world's wealth is concentrated in Silicon Valley, which becomes its own economy running at a different speed than the rest of the world and leaving it behind. All of these outcomes would be great for economic growth, but not so great for the labor market or those who are left behind. Second, some people say that human jobs will move to the physical world, which avoids the whole category of cognitive labor, where AI is progressing so rapidly. I am not sure how safe this is either. A lot of physical labor is already being done by machines, e.g. manufacturing, or will soon be done by machines, e.g. driving. Also, sufficiently powerful AI will be able to accelerate the development of robots, and then control those robots in the physical world. It may buy some time, which is a good thing, but but I'm worried it won't by much. And even if the disruption was limited only to cognitive tasks, it would still be an unprecedentedly large and rapid disruption. Third, perhaps some tasks inherently require or greatly benefit from a human touch. I'm a little more uncertain about this one, but I'm still skeptical that it will be enough to offset the bulk of the impacts I described above. AI is already widely used for customer service. Many people report that it is easier to talk to AI about their personal problems than to talk to a therapist, that the AI is more patient. When my sister was struggling with medical problems during a pregnancy, she felt she wasn't getting the answers or support she needed from her care providers, and she found Claude to have a better bedside manner, as well as succeeding better at diagnosing the problem. I'm sure there are some tasks for which a human touch really is important, but I'm not sure how many, and here we're talking about finding work for nearly everyone in the labor market. Fourth, some may argue that comparative advantage will still protect humans. Under the law of comparative advantage, even if AI is better than humans at everything, any relative differences between the human and AI profile of skills creates a basis of trade and specialization between humans and AI. The problem is that if AIs are literally thousands of times more productive than humans, this logic starts to break down. Even tiny transaction costs could make it not worth it for AI to trade with humans. And human wages may be very low, even if they technically have something to offer. It's possible all of these factors can be addressed, that the labor market is resilient enough to adapt to even such an enormous disruption. But even if it can eventually adapt, the factors above suggest that the short-term shock will be unprecedented in size. Defenses. What can we do about this problem? I have several suggestions, some of which Anthropic is already doing. The first thing is simply to get accurate data about what is happening with job displacement in real time. When an economic change happens very quickly, it's hard to get reliable data about what is happening, and without reliable data, it is hard to design effective policies. For example, government data is currently lacking granular, high-frequency data on AI adoption across firms and industries. For the last year, Anthropic has been operating and publicly releasing an economic index that shows use of our models almost in real time, broken down by industry, task, location, and even things like whether a task was being automated or conducted collaboratively. We also have an economic advisory council to help us interpret this data and see what is coming. Second, AI companies have a choice in how they work with enterprises. The very inefficiency of traditional enterprises means that their rollout of AI can be very path dependent, and there is some room to choose a better path. Enterprises often have a choice between cost savings, doing the same thing with fewer people, and innovation, doing more with the same number of people. The market will inevitably produce both eventually, and any competitive AI company will have to serve some of both, but there may be some room to steer companies towards innovation when possible, and it may buy us some time. Anthropic is actively thinking about this. Third, companies should think about how to take care of their employees. In the short term, being creative about ways to reassign employees within companies may be a promising way to stave off the need for layoffs. In the long term, in a world with enormous total wealth, in which many companies increase greatly in value due to increased productivity and capital concentration, it may be feasible to pay human employees even long after they are no longer providing economic value in the traditional sense. Anthropic is currently considering a range of possible pathways for our own employees that we will share in the near future. Fourth, wealthy individuals have an obligation to help solve this problem. It is sad to me that many wealthy individuals, especially in the tech industry, have recently adopted a cynical and nihilistic attitude that philanthropy is inevitably fraudulent or useless. Both private philanthropy like the Gates Foundation and public programs like PEPFAR have saved tens of millions of lives in the developing world and helped to create economic opportunity in the developed world. All of Anthropic's co-founders have pledged to donate 80% of our wealth, and Anthropic staff have individually pledged to donate company shares worth billions at current prices, donations that the company has committed to matching. Fifth, while all the above private actions can be helpful, ultimately a macroeconomic problem this large will require government intervention. The natural policy response to an enormous economic pie coupled with high inequality due to a lack of jobs or poorly paid jobs for many is progressive taxation. The tax could be general or could be targeted against AI companies in particular. Obviously, tax design is complicated, and there are many ways for it to go wrong. I don't support poorly designed tax policies. I think the extreme levels of inequality predicted in this essay justify a more robust tax policy on basic moral grounds, but I can also make a pragmatic argument to the world's billionaires that it's in their interest to support a good version of it. If they don't support a good version, they'll inevitably get a bad version designed by a mob. Ultimately, I think of all of the above interventions as ways to buy time. In the end, AI will be able to do everything, and we need to grapple with that. It's my hope that by that time, we can use AI itself to help us restructure markets in ways that work for everyone, and that the interventions above can get us through the transitional period. Economic concentration of power. Separate from the problem of job displacement or economic inequality per se is the problem of economic concentration of power. Section 1 discussed the risk that humanity gets disempowered by AI, and Section 3 discussed the risk that citizens get disempowered by their governments by force or coercion. But another kind of disempowerment can occur if there is such a huge concentration of wealth that a small group of people effectively controls government policy with their influence. And ordinary citizens have no influence because they lack economic leverage. Democracy is ultimately backstopped by the idea that the population as a whole is necessary for the operation of the economy. If that economic leverage goes away, then the implicit social contract of democracy may stop working. Others have written about this, so I needn't go into great detail about it here, but I agree with the concern, and I worry it is already starting to happen. To be clear, I am not opposed to people making a lot of money. There's a strong argument that it incentivizes economic growth under normal conditions. I am sympathetic to concerns about impeding innovation by killing the golden goose that generates it. But in a scenario where GDP growth is 10 to 20% a year and AI is rapidly taking over the economy, yet single individuals hold appreciable fractions of the GDP, innovation is not the thing to worry about. The thing to worry about is a level of wealth concentration that will break society. The most famous example of extreme concentration of wealth in US history is the Gilded Age, and the wealthiest industrialist of the Gilded Age was John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller's wealth amounted to 2% of the US GDP at the time, 42. A similar fraction today would lead to a fortune of $600 billion, and the richest person in the world today, Elon Musk, already exceeds that at roughly $700 billion. So we are already at historically unprecedented levels of wealth concentration, even before most of the economic impact of AI. I don't think it is too much of a stretch if we get a country of geniuses to imagine AI companies, semiconductor companies, and perhaps downstream application companies generating $3T in revenue per year, 43. Being valued at $30T and leading to personal fortunes well into the trillions. In that world, the debates we have about tax policy today simply won't apply, as we will be in a fundamentally different situation. Related to this, the coupling of this economic concentration of wealth with the political system already concerns me. AI data centers already represent a substantial fraction of US economic growth, 44, and are thus strongly tying together the financial interests of large tech companies, which are increasingly focused on either AI or AI infrastructure, and the political interests of the government in a way that can produce perverse incentives. We already see this through the reluctance of tech companies to criticize the US government and the government's support for extreme anti-regulatory policies on AI. Defenses. What can be done about this? First, and most obviously, companies should simply choose not to be part of it. Anthropic has always strived to be a policy actor and not a political one, and to maintain our authentic views whatever the administration. We've spoken up in favor of sensible AI regulation and export controls that are in the public interest, even when these are at odds with government policy. 45. Many people have told me that we should stop doing this, that it could lead to unfavorable treatment, but in the year we've been doing it, Anthropic's valuation has increased by over 6x, an almost unprecedented jump at our commercial scale. Second, the AI industry needs a healthier relationship with government, one based on substantive policy engagement rather than political alignment. Our choice to engage on policy substance rather than politics is sometimes read as a tactical error or failure to read the room rather than a principled decision, and that framing concerns me. In a healthy democracy, companies should be able to advocate for good policy for its own sake. Related to this, a public backlash against AI is brewing. This could be a corrective, but it's currently unfocused. Much of it targets issues that aren't actually problems, like data center water usage, and proposes solutions, like data center bans or poorly designed wealth taxes, that wouldn't address the real concerns. The underlying issue that deserves attention is ensuring that AI development remains accountable to the public interest, not captured by any particular political or commercial alliance, and it seems important to focus the public discussion there. Third, the macroeconomic interventions I described earlier in this section, as well as a resurgence of private philanthropy, can help to balance the economic scales, addressing both the job displacement and concentration of economic power problems at once. We should look to the history of our country here. Even in the Gilded Age, industrialists such as Rockefeller and Carnegie felt a strong obligation to society at large, a feeling that society had contributed enormously to their success, and they needed to give back. That spirit seems to be increasingly missing today, and I think it is a large part of the way out of this economic dilemma. Those who are at the forefront of AI's economic boom should be willing to give away both their wealth and their power. 5.
Okay.